Lane Rhodes was quickly awoken by the feeling of impending doom, with a tightness in his chest that was so familiar he began to anticipate it. At first he assumed those feelings were minor anxiety attacks, but Lane soon realized that the attacks had become eerily consistent, only happening while he was asleep and always jolting him awake at precisely 2:18 a.m. There seemed to be no dots to connect as Lane struggled to grasp why this was happening and how 2:18 was significant, or if it was just a strange coincidence. Lane always started his day with Olivia at the forefront of his mind. Her name flickered in his brain like a broken signal, riddled with uncertainty. She was still missing. Lane's best friend had vanished off the face of the earth, and I felt as though I was the only one looking for her, the only one who cared. His eyes shifted to his left wrist, where the cracked glass of his wristwatch stared back at him. 2:18 a.m. The time seemed to be frozen for days. No, maybe weeks. He wondered how the watch face had cracked, but he just couldn't recall. He became entirely consumed with finding Olivia, no matter what, at any cost. Something inside him had changed the day she disappeared, something no one could continue to ignore. Throwing on his jacket, Lane headed outside, his footsteps swift and intense with purpose. The people around him moved as if in a haze, passing by without so much as a glance. Why didn't anyone else care about Olivia? He had asked them over and over, but their responses were always hollow and indifferent. Why wasn't anyone looking for her? But he couldn't dwell on those people. I had to stay focused. She was out there somewhere, waiting for me to find her, to save her. Olivia needed me. Lane found himself under the massive oak tree, familiar yet looming. It was where he always ended up when tension was high and his confidence was low. The tree's sprawling branches stretched out like a person opening their arms for a hug. The oak was so large it cast shadows across the entire courtyard adjacent to where Lane lived. This had been their spot, where Olivia and I spent hours talking and laughing. But now, the tree was a hollow reminder of what had been. Olivia was gone, and every day felt like a race against time, a time that didn't seem to move anymore. He sat down under the tree, staring at the broken watch on his wrist. 2:18 a.m. That time tortured him, tugging at every part of his psyche.
Why that time?
Lane, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Dr. Reese, Lane's concerned psychiatrist. His gaze was calm but seemed apprehensive.
You're out here again.
She's still missing. No one is doing a damn thing about it. It's like they've all just forgotten her. Dr. Reese sat down beside him, the oak tree's shadows sprinkling on the ground between them.
Lane, you know why I'm here. I'm not going to give up on you, but you need to let your guard down with me. You need to tell me about the last night you were with Olivia. It'll help if you just open yourself up and tell me what happened.
Lane's mind swirled as he tried to recover his memories. They had been at the bar, like always. He could see her face, hear her laughter, but beyond that, everything else was a blur. How did she disappear? Where had Olivia gone? I don't remember, Lane admitted, frustration building in his chest. They were together and then she was just gone. Dr. Reese nodded as if he had heard this many times before, his eyes drifting to the watch on Lane's wrist.
Your watch. It looks busted. Time's not even right. How'd you manage to break it?
Lane frowned, his fingers tracing the cracked glass. It was a detail that always escaped him, as if his mind refused to give him the answer. He wasn't sure, but he knew it was fine when Olivia was with him.
Lane, for God's sake, think carefully. What happened after you two left the bar?
Suddenly Lane's chest tightened, his stomach twisting like a never-ending roller coaster. His mind latched onto fragmented memories, desperately pulling them from the fog. Olivia had wanted to call an Uber. We should call an Uber, she had said, sounding mildly concerned, but Lane had shrugged it off, waving away her worries. He said he was fine. That was it. They had gotten into Lane's car. Olivia had strongly protested, saying it wasn't safe, but he had been so sure, so confident, so self-righteous. When Lane made promises, Olivia never questioned them. He always convinced her, no matter what the risk involved. Piece by piece the memories returned. They had been driving. The road was incredibly dark, his vision blurred from the alcohol. Olivia sat beside him, her voice unsettled. Then it happened. The screech of tires, the smell of burning rubber, the sharp turn, the crash. The car had spun out of control. He could still hear the sound of shattering glass, metal twisting, Olivia screaming, the crash. No, Lane whimpered. Lane whispered under his breath, barely understandable as the truth hit him. He had caused a senseless, devastating crash.
His hands trembled as he glanced down at his watch. 2:18 a.m. The moment the car collided with the guardrail, the moment the world had come apart, that's when the watch broke, when everything stopped. He killed her. It was his fault.
The realization hit Lane like a tidal wave. Olivia wasn't missing. She hadn't vanished. She had died that night in the crash, and Lane had been too drunk, too arrogant to stop it.
"Where am I?" Lane asked.
Lane gasped, the world around him starting to blur. The oak tree, the paths, the faces he passed every day, it all began to feel foreign, like a dream he couldn't wake up from.
You're at Rosewood Psychiatric Facility, Lane. You've been here ever since the accident.
Lane shook his head, trying to make sense of it. Rosewood? That couldn't be right. He had been out looking for Olivia. He had been searching for her every day, hadn't he?
You've been here for 7 years. Every day, you wake up and your mind resets. You forget what happened. You forget that Olivia is gone. And you go looking for her again.
No, that's not possible, Lane insisted. I just saw her. She's still out there. I have to find her.
You've been saying that every day, Lane, but she's gone. The crash was fatal. You survived. She didn't.
Lane's hands shook as he stared down at the broken watch again. 2:18 a.m., the exact moment when the crash had happened. The exact moment when Olivia died. Tears welled up in his eyes as the full weight of it came crashing down. He had killed her, not on purpose, but through his own recklessness. She had trusted him, and he had failed her. Dr. Reese stood slowly, his gaze lingering on Lane.
Tomorrow it will start again, unless you choose to accept it.
But Lane couldn't. He couldn't face the truth. He couldn't bear the thought that Olivia was gone because of him. As Dr. Reese walked away, Lane stayed frozen under the oak tree, clutching the broken watch in his trembling hands. 2:18 a.m., the time that would never move forward. At that moment everything stopped. I'll find her tomorrow. The words slipping out like a promise to himself.